Today we're working on a 1994 Mitsubishi Diamante. I don't have my camera equipment, so I'm using my phone. Hopefully this isn't a ridiculous video, but we're doing the rack and pinion on it. I'm going to start by jacking it up, taking the tires off on both sides. So once the tires off, the next thing to do is to take the outer tie rod, take the cotter pin out, this nut, and then we're going to probably replace these anyway. So you can pickle fork here. Sometimes you just beat on the knuckle and it'll vibrate out. But that's our next move, outer tie rod, both sides. As a tip, before you pull this all the way out and get it loose, you can loosen up the lock nut or jam nut here first while it's in place. And that'll help hold it while you break that nut loose there. Now that I got those off, as I back this out to get the tie rod off, I'm going to count threads or count how many turns it took. So when we put the new one on, we're somewhere in the ballpark. It's going to get an alignment anyway after this is all done, but put it in the ballpark and then we don't have to adjust it as much once we get it on the alignment machine. Okay, in order to get any further, we have to take the exhaust. This is the front of the exhaust. You have two bolts up there, and then if you come down to the back side, you have a bolt there, and then one on this side as well, because we need access to, there's a bolt. Let's see if I can get oriented. Oh, it's back here. I don't know if you can see it. I'm not oriented enough. But anyway, I'll show you once this is off, but I have to take the exhaust off, or at least the front part of it, in order to get to two bolts that are holding the rack in place. So let's get these exhaust bolts off, hopefully. So now that we got the exhaust out of the way, there's this member here. It spans all the way back in the middle. That also needs to come out. It's just a matter of about 3 or 4, I think there's 4 14mm bolts. So that's the cross member that came out. I was mistaken by its shape. It had this little thing I thought was separate, but it comes together. No big deal. This doesn't hold up anything. It's more for torsion and, flex stability of the vehicle. So just zip it off and don't worry about anything falling on you. So now that cross member's out of the way, you have access to the bolts here holding on the rack and pinion. You can't get to this bolt here without taking off the sway bar, and you don't have to take it all the way out. Just pull off these brackets just so this can be moved out of the way some, so you can get to that bottom bolt. So now that I got all the hard bottom side stuff done, you come up and can do the upper side stuff. You have those two lines right there that need to come off, and then behind this boot you lift it up and there's a little nut there, or a bolt. So those three things, those two lines, and then that bolt for the steering column, and then the top stuff's done for now, and then I can pull out the rack. So now that I got the lines off and the steering column pulled out, I'm going to position the steering wheel in the center position. So when it all goes back together, it'll be as center as possible. That shaft has splines on it that the steering column goes onto. Being a spline or two off probably isn't a big deal, but you just want to be as close to center as possible. So there it is out of the vehicle. There's a clamp here underneath and a clamp here underneath by the sway bar link, or the sway bar, that just had two bolts that come out. And then to get it out, you have to drop it, slide it over enough for this inner tie rod to come past the lower control arm down, and then you go back the opposite direction. So it really comes out the driver's side, or at least that's how I got it out, was the driver's side, but I slid it towards the passenger, down, and then out. So there it is. Let's get the new one, line it up, make sure it's the right one, size and everything, and get ready to slap it back together. So we got our new item we're going to put in, just to compare the two with each other, and everything really does look good. Same length. Some things you need to switch over from the old one are these rubber boots here for the clamps. They just swap them over. Before we put that in, it's always a good idea when you replace a power steering pump or rack to flush the system. So we'll make sure we do that as well before we get everything back together and put the fluid in. Okay, so I have the new one just in with a couple of bolts just tacked in place. And then I came up here to make sure that my, it probably won't focus, but make sure that my steering column goes right over the top of that spline there. So I want to do that before I start tightening things up down below, just to make sure I have enough wiggle room to get that on. So now we're on, we can start tightening things up from the bottom. Okay, so these bracket bolts here for the rack are torqued to 51 foot-pounds. All right, next are your sway bar bracket, this side, and then on the other side. The lighting sucks, but there it is, nice and tight. And then after that, we move on to we can put the exhaust on next. That's probably what we'll do, and then our cross members. Okay, the two cross members are in, torqued to 51 foot-pounds. That finishes up what needs to be done down here. Everything is on and tight, so the rest of the work is done up top. So I went ahead and put both tie rods on. The came with a new cotter pin, and then you don't have to tighten these too tight. I mean, you want them snug, but it's getting aligned anyway, so yeah, just snug them up. The alignment guy will thank you for that. Okay, have the new O-rings on the lines, and I put a little lube on them so they don't split when I put them in. There's kind of a sequence, I don't know if you can see down there, but you want to put the bottom one on first, snug, tight, and then you can put the top one on. And then we'll tighten down the steering column, and that should be it. Then we fill her up, make sure it doesn't leak, and take it for a test drive. So now that everything is tight, topped off with fluid, you want to go ahead and turn the wheel all the way in one direction, all the way back. Do that a few times to purge any air that's in the lines, retop it off. I already did that, so now I'm taking it for a spin around the block a few times. All right, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.